Welcome to Snoozecast, the podcast designed to help you fall asleep. Find us on snoozecast.com and follow us on social media and wherever you listen to podcasts. Our current goal is to get to 100 reviews on the podcast's app to help as many new listeners find us as possible. If you haven't subscribed and written a review yet, please do. Thank you to everyone who's taken the time to do so already. Please know that we read every single review, often out loud to each other, and we can't tell you how happy it makes us to know we're helping you get to Snoozeville. This episode is brought to you by Casual Fridays. Tonight, we're bringing you a Snoozecast original titled Get This Bread. In this soft-boiled whodunit, a rising star editor is suddenly fired, leaving a pair of co-workers to pick up the pieces and the clues to solving the mystery. Let's get cozy. Close your eyes. Relax your body into the softness of your bed. Now, take a few deep breaths. It was incredibly quiet. The fluorescent lights were still off, and there was no one else in the office. I sat down at my desk. Soon, the day's emails would start trickling in here at Wick Publishing. The company has a handful of magazines in its stable, niche titles, catering to very specific audiences, enthusiastic, lonely people who find solace in specificity. Scanning the latest batch, one had come in unusually late, 2:03 a.m. The subject line wasn't any less odd. "Let's get this bread," it chirped. The address was from a country where everyone knows to keep their mouth shut. I had seen that address once before. Back then, I carried a $2 notebook and was paid to ask a lot of questions. Now, I do my writing on a $2,000 machine and dodge queries all day. When I was hired 10 months ago, I was glad to stop chasing stories as a reporter and start relaxing. But I'm a link jockey now. I seek out trends, not the truth. And yeah, having nights and weekends off is nice, but the work is dull. No matter what the weather is like outside, inside this office, it's always 30 on an overcast day in March. Lately, there had been a break in the clouds. News was big changes were on the way. And they were. Only the editor of Great Cranes magazine, Adelaide, wouldn't be around to see them. Yesterday, she took a long walk down a short hallway with the CEO. She never returned. Now this email, that address, I had seen it once before. from a badge with an axe to grind. It arrived with an attachment of dirt big enough to bury the city's top cop. So I shared it with my publisher. She said it wasn't worth chasing. Bull, I thought. But what could I do? Rent was due in 3 days, and her checks always cleared. There was only one thing to do all these years later. So I started reading. Hi, friend. I was let go yesterday. Would you do me a favor and grab a cookbook from my cubicle? It's called Let's Get This Bread. You'll find it in the middle drawer. Be well, Adelaide. She had been the IT editor since arriving 4 months before me. That's all the time she needed to goose Great Grains' web traffic enough to capture everyone's attention. She more than doubled page views. Sure, by Wix standards, that was something to shout about. Industry-wise, though, it wasn't that impressive. But no one seemed to notice. Maybe they didn't get out much. Whatever my thoughts on the numbers were, they didn't matter. She was getting win after win, up until she lost everything yesterday. I didn't know what to think. Adelaide had done freelance work for me in the past. She would write for anyone if the role was fat enough. I'd found that I could work with her a little and not let that bother me. Maybe because it was that way when we first met. I'd come to dig her writing, despite knowing she never meant the words she wrote. Why should it bother me? It was a coincidence we both ended up at Wick Publishing. What she thought when I walked in on my first day, I don't know. I do remember what she said about that drink. I laughed, even though she wasn't joking. The company had held on to some publishing traditions from its glitzy past. There were still expense accounts, though they had shrunk, planes to catch, even if first class was no longer an option, and plenty of office happy hours. Adelaide enjoyed the faded glory as much, if not more, than I did. She also never asked for favors. So I went to her cubicle to find that cookbook. Thumbing through stacks of paper in the middle drawer, I found manila folders and a handful of unsent wedding invitations. However, Let's Get This Bread was missing. I shut the drawer. Annoyed, I headed to the break room for a drink. Only I wasn't thirsty. I should have let it all go. It was almost 9 a.m., and no work had been done. An otherwise ordinary Thursday utterly derailed. I took a glance at the massive chalkboard on the back wall of the break room, listening to the tuneful drip of hot coffee filling a paper cup. Written dead center in loopy red script was a question. Whither, Adelaide? What a thing to ask, I thought bitterly. "That's unusual," a voice said from behind. "Something like that has your signature all over it." "You know I don't write that neatly," I said. "This is R.J. Casella, marketing." R.J. had his ears on everyone, but he was quiet about it. Instead of getting caught up in the gossip, he got all the things that needed doing done. No parade necessary. "It's not a bad question," I said. "For once, I don't have an answer," he responded. I obliged, telling him what little I knew at that moment. He listened and looked like he was about to say something very important, and then caught a glance at the break room door. It was almost time for the morning rush. "I'm sending a newsletter test out in 15 minutes. I'll CC you," he said. "And someone else. Someone you'll want to talk to." He walked out, leaving me alone. RJ's test was normal enough. I scanned the names. Among the usual suspects was one unusual one. Well, it's Heidi Nunes. I shut my laptop, freeing myself from its dull, hypnotic glow, which held my attention like so many new notifications for a harrowing number of hours each day. Heidi, a graphic designer, is a tall, stately blonde with cow lilies tattooed shoulder to wrist down both arms. A lithe, liquid figure, she wore flannel gray or ink black tops with skirts that were completely appropriate office attire, and yet somehow not appropriate at all. Adelaide and Heidi formed a fast, unlikely friendship. People without proper perspective debated the depth of its sincerity. There wasn't that much to it, really. As everyone knew, the most notable thing about Adelaide was her success. It started attracting attention, with trouble likely not far behind. Here at Wick, your enemies always arrived smiling. Adelaide knew being seen around the water cooler with the rogue designer couldn't be a bad thing, and they became nearly inseparable. Finding answers meant seeking out Heidi. A dangerous proposition, of course, because Heidi didn't much like questions. They might earn me a slap from the only person who had had a window on Adelaide's final days. Well, at least I'd enjoy the view. Noon struck. The office shuffled out for lunch. I followed Heidi to a bench where she sat in cool shade, looking miffed. I walked over. She stood and grabbed my hand tightly. "You're the last person I want to see," she said like a knife. "We have a mutual friend, you know. Have you heard from her lately? I know she was first in line for unemployment yesterday." Heidi's eyes were big, looking directly into mine. I had never spoken to her this close before. Her height was a surprise. If you had anything to do with her leaving, I'll make sure your next move will be to customer service. You'll enjoy talking to knuckle draggers for 8 hours a day about subscription errors. Whoa, I said. Whoa, Heidi. How about, before making threats, we ignore some emails from each other first? This escalated awfully fast. All I'm trying to do is find out what happened to a friend. You might be too. Or are you in the dark as much as I am? Her face softened. She was fired for something she didn't do. Railroaded. Then her face tightened, as if preparing to strike a blow. But that was a day after you two had a drink, she said. She doesn't drink, and you don't do much talking. What's the story? Adelaide and I did get a drink, our first one in a long time. We found ourselves side by side at a bar, slouched over strong drinks under weak lights, trying to figure out why her relationship with the CEO had recently gone south. He used to say hi every morning. We'd have little talks, she said. I noticed. Then, 3 weeks ago, he walks right by. He didn't even look at me. And I was getting messages from him nearly every day. Short ones, sometimes critical, mostly praise. He was paying attention to everything I was doing. Then it all ended. She reached for her glass, took a sorrowful sip, and went on. After he nixed our morning chats, I could still get a chuckle out of him by saying just about anything. Last week, he stopped laughing at my jokes that were only kind of funny. On Monday, he stopped laughing at my jokes that were actually funny. I picked up my glass and tilted it high. Am I going to be fired? She asked flatly. It feels like I'm going to be fired. I let down the glass gently and said, casually, if you get fired, Adelaide, you wouldn't be around to make the boss look good. Teddy is in his office every day. You know he can't keep his mouth shut about anything. I don't think he can actually write. Did you know he was mowing lawns for pocket change this time last year? I heard. Teddy had a knack for creating problems that only he could solve and making sure the right people knew about it. He's smart. There's no denying that. In a matter of months, he went from a junior associate nobody to taking meetings in an office with his name on the door. He's also got a new title, so confusingly vague, no one's quite sure what he's supposed to be doing for 8 hours a day. Adelaide let out a low, slow sigh. Yesterday, he changed the passwords on all my social media accounts. He claimed some security breach. Of course, details were sketchy. I didn't know he could do that, I said. He's got all of the accounts, as of yesterday. I don't know how or why. We're going to have to start watching him, I said. Yeah, and our backs. I finished my story and met Heidi's savage look. Look, I said, I got a nice gig here. I'm minding my own affairs, keeping my fingernails clean. I've got a chunk of digital real estate in a neighborhood I don't mind living in. So what happens? I watch the one person who knows what's what pick up a pink slip and walk away with nothing. Now you say she was fired on false charges and blame me somehow? So where am I at? I've wasted my morning tracking you down instead of wasting it on SEO. Wait, she contacted you? She needed something from her desk. It wasn't there. A book. A cookbook, actually. Had a funny name. Let's Get This Bread. A cookbook. Heidi stared. What does Let's Get This Bread have to do with it? In her email, I said. She wanted me to grab it, only it wasn't there. Heidi rose. All of the fight seemed to have come back into her. This will be one day they can highlight in the shared calendar, she said. You've seen the book? The tall blonde nodded. In Teddy's hands. Then call your boyfriend. Why would I do that? Because we're going to be working late tonight. I wouldn't want him to worry. Most of the cubicles were still empty for lunch when Heidi and I walked into reception. T was seated behind the large, L-shaped desk. As we walked up to her, her eyebrows danced in surprise. I didn't know graphics and editorial were taking lunches together. Special project, I said. We'll be staying late tonight building assets. Could I grab the keys to lock up later? She reached into a desk and removed a jangly mass of metal. She struggled to unhook the main door's key until I grabbed her hand. Hey, no worries, I said. We'll take the whole lot, only for a few hours. Heidi is the second one in the office each morning. Relieved, T reached over to drop the keys in my outstretched hand. We'll lock everything up tight, I said. A lot of the office lights were off when Heidi and I made our move. We had outweighted the others, quietly clicking away at our desks until the ribbon of red brake lights on the interstate had thinned considerably. Inside Teddy's office, Heidi crouched down and opened desk drawers, shuffling papers, digging until she let out a cry and shot up. In her hand was the book. Leaning over her shoulder for a closer look, I thought I smelled cool streams and mountain air. Impossible. She opened Let's Get This Bread. Inside were 3 pieces of paper. One had been torn from Teddy's own yellow legal pad. The other 2 were plain, white, and folded in half. This was written with Adelaide's hand, Heidi said, holding up one of the white papers. Look, these are her logins for Great Grains' social media accounts. And this one, she said, holding up the second white paper, are last month's logins after Teddy took over. RJ said Teddy was gunning for all the passwords. He said it made sense to consolidate. Heidi took a long, questioning look at the yellow paper. Why would someone switch the administrator credentials from our corporate email account to a personal one? I don't think that's even possible. They would need to get past the 2-factor authentication, I said. But if they could do it, and they did do it, my best guess would be job security. You can't fire the person who has the keys to all the social accounts. Wick would be locked out. They'd have to build those audiences from scratch. Think about how much traffic the sites would lose. Couldn't we just get new passwords? She asked. I laughed. Have you ever tried to contact one of those companies? It'd be like trying to make a complaint about the internet itself. Who would you even call? Right now, we're all playing in the same sandbox, and there's no teacher to go crying to when a kid takes your shovel. Teddy just took all of the editor's shovels. Heidi moaned. The yellow paper fell from her hand. There, lying on the ground, it revealed more writing. Teddy's logins for both his professional and personal accounts. Heidi's voice went smooth and persuasive. It's not really hacking if you have the passwords, right? Inside Teddy's inbox, amid endless fantasy football alerts, there was a passive-aggressive power struggle over control of Great Cranes' social media accounts. Other emails showed that Teddy had been snatching passwords from all of the editors. Most had given up control willingly, glad to have one less task. There were some holdouts, but Teddy's persistence eventually wore everyone down. Adelaide had fended him off for months through skillful deflection, until Teddy fired a fatal shot via an email sent to the CEO. Hi there. I hope you're having a great day so far. Happy Friday. The weekend is almost here. Unfortunately, there's some concerning behavior I must bring to your attention. I discovered it on the company's internal messenger service. As you know, I had that implemented a few months ago. Overall, I'd say it's improved communication immeasurably. However, a few people aren't using it as intended. Attached, you'll find inappropriate messages between Adelaide and one of the designers. See you at the company barbecue later today. Best, Teddy. Heidi logged out, defeated. We returned the cookbook to the drawer and locked up. Outside it was a fine night. We stood beneath the pale light of a street light in the parking lot. Those attachments weren't real, said Heidi. He faked those. Adelaide and I never said those things. Well, we said some of those things, but not all of them. Months ago, I heard from RJ that Teddy had finagled total access to that platform. No one thought anything of it at the time. When he realized Adelaide was never going to hand over her social accounts, he stepped in and got creative with whatever you two were chatting about. Then, he made sure Adelaide's next job would be writing ad copy for commercials that only play on gas pump televisions. He figures it's over, Heidi said matter of fact. I'm sorry he feels that way. What do you have planned? I asked. Well, what would you do? Probably tell a lot of people, I said. But you know me. I never feel much like talking. She smiled knowingly. I was late the next morning, about 15 minutes. Everyone was standing, talking over one another. Snippets of conversation hung in the air like bats. Wait, do they read everything on there? I thought they only checked if there were complaints. What about email? Are they reading all these emails? I flipped open my laptop. Among the unopened mail was one with an intriguing subject line from an untraceable account. This is who you work with, it read. Attached was a zip with several hundred items culled from Teddy's personal files. Sure, there was the evidence of his crimes, but Heidi thought serving up some embarrassment, shirtless mirror selfies mostly, would tip the scales of justice. The email had been sent to everyone who worked at the company, on-site and remote. Interestingly, Teddy's name had been left off. It had been sent while he was in a meeting, and when he returned, the office went silent. Confused, he hurried to his office, slamming the door. He started tapping at his phone, pacing in a tight circle, the uncertainty bearing down. He'd have an answer soon. It wasn't yet 9:30. I left for a break anyways, stepping out into a warm September day. There was Heidi, sitting on a bench in the shade, legs crossed. Her left foot was bouncing excitedly. "That was a heck of a thing to do, troublemaker," I said. Heidi flashed a genuine smile, a rarity. I never did piece together why Adelaide went through the trouble of using that foreign account in the first place. I went on. Seemed like a lot of trouble, for no good reason. "I saw her last night and asked the same," said Heidi. "She said if it had been a regular email, you would have ignored it, and that's all she wrote. She knew seeing that account would get your gears grinding." "Son of a gun," I said. She was right. Heidi sounded hopeful. "Do you think they'll bring her back?" "They'll replace her with some kid who'll say everything that needs saying in 144 characters or less. But she'll be okay. I heard she was getting the scratch together to buy Great Grains. She's going to crowdsource the dough." "Wouldn't that be something? We could change the name," said Heidi. "We could change a lot of things," I said, "once we get that bread."